Take a knee, everybody, and welcome to another video, the final video on Guild Wars 2's feature pack stuff. They released 2 blog posts today, which almost sounded ludicrous to me that they would do such a thing. But when you really look, the third post is actually very short and doesn't have that much information. Originally, this was due to go up tomorrow. However, I guess they realized, wow, this is a real anticlimax to have this be the last blog post, so we'll just put them up together. And so this is what we've got today. I'm going to be talking to you guys, probably for quite a while, about the new server system going into Guild Wars 2, the final feature that's coming with this feature pack that they call the Mega Server System, which I don't know about the name, but does actually sound pretty cool. So I'll open it up with a quote from them, since this could take a little bit to wrap your heads around, and then I'll try and explain it myself for you guys. They say, "We're making it easier to play with your friends on every PvE map, regardless of home world. By restructuring the relationship between players and worlds, we're changing our server system to connect you with the people who will best benefit your social experience in PvE." Right, so let me explain to you how Guild Wars 2 currently works if you need a quick refresher, and I'll describe to you how that's transforming with the update. At account creation right now, you pick a home world for yourself. I chose Emery Bay. And what this does is determine 2 primary things. Number 1, it determines what world you fight for in World vs. World, the colour that you are, the base that you begin in. And it also determines that while you're in PvE, what version of a map you go in. See, right now, there isn't just one Queensdale in Guild Wars 2, there's loads of them. There's a different version for every single server or home world that exists out there. I'm on Emery Bay and playing in the Plains of Ashford. The only other players I'm ever going to see in that map are other players in Emery Bay on the Plains of Ashford. There could be upwards of 50 people worldwide all in that same map, or hell, even in the same very local area to me, but I'm only ever seeing a couple of them, and it makes the game look a lot more dead than perhaps it truly is, because everybody's like unnecessarily spread out. This wasn't necessarily such a problem at launch, because you find with games like this, around the first few months, even the first year I would say, the player base tends to be rather spread out as they're experiencing all of the content for the first time. But now that the games are getting a little bit older, people in general are congregating to very specific areas. They're hanging around Lions Arch or Gw2 Fields as it now is, or they're doing very specific dungeon rotations, or they're in very specific champion farms, and the population in the other areas of the game is now not high enough to warrant having like 20 different versions of that same map just for NA, even though they did need all those separate servers to exist. It just means that in Guild Wars 2 right now, you're either seeing loads of people or very few. And you're going to be seeing very few while leveling up, namely, because this is something many people have already got out of the way with. This is also something that's probably quite crippling to the game, because as an MMO, it's meant to look like it's got a big community there. This was also, I should add, a huge issue for the first game too. Not just because of separate servers, but also because that game was so heavily instanced. Anyway, under the new system, all those individual maps are merging together. For PvE, there is really no huge relevance to the world you chose at account creation. That is still important for World vs. World and still partly for PvE, which I'll explain, but in general, all those maps now merge together. Instead of having 20 different versions of Queensdale with just a couple in each, everyone is going to be in one version, so you get that thrill of the population that was always there but just hidden from you. Now, don't run away with this here. They're not going to be able to combine every single NA version of Gw2 Fields together right now and have like these immense maps. There's still a cap on the number of players that can be in a map. They can't get around that, so there still will be different versions of a single map. There can still be 5 different versions of Queensdale, say. It's just that they've all been condensed down and there's lots of players in those 5 versions instead of just very few across many maps. Well, now there's a bit of a problem. Currently in the game, you know exactly which version of a map you're going in because it's tied just to your world, and there you go. Well, now you might be wondering, okay, there's still different versions of the map. How does it decide where you get placed? And this seems like where the core of their mega server technology stuff really comes in. The game's going to try and intelligently, and supposedly this will work, this is the kind of thing we can be very skeptical about right now. Supposedly, the game will decide which map you go in based on a lot of different factors. Based on people who are on your friends list, people who are in your guild, the server that you chose, your world that does still have relevance in high population areas where there are lots of maps, and even for people over on EU as well, your language preferences. Supposedly you're being intelligently placed into different maps based on these criteria. It does mean that even though now your home world really means a lot less for PvE, it still does have some meaning. Alright, let me give you some examples in case people are a little bit lost, right? Think about Gw2 Fields. This is basically the new LA, right? Even at dead hours during the game, you're going to find that map is nearing its player limit for everyone's home worlds. And even on high population servers, it's probably full and started to ping out overflows. Overflows which will basically no longer exist. This is almost like the entire game becomes overflows. Well, under the new system, if you choose to load into Gw2 fields, where there's a lot of players, you're not just going to be thrown into this blob with loads of other people from other worlds. I will be thrown in with a bunch of other Emery Bay players. All the Emery Bay people will still be in the same general map. However, if there's a bunch of my guildies, for example, setting up a meeting somewhere in Gw2 fields, because we want to do the Gw2 fields champ train because it looked kind of fun and kooky, then the game will know automatically, this person shouldn't be with the Emery Bay people, really they should just be with their guild. We'll put them together into that specific map. So this is the way it's meant to be working. Here's another example. Talked about Fields of Ruin earlier. Iron Marches is probably, in my mind, it competes with Brisbane Wildlands, I think, as one of the most dead maps in Guild Wars 2, right? So let's say Iron Marches. Let's say I've just gone from Gw2 Fields, and now in that same moment, I'm like, screw this, I don't want to be with all these Emery Bay people, I want to go play the game somewhere else. I go to Iron Marches. However, there aren't loads of different players hanging around there all the time. It's not almost pushing into what would be overflows right now. So instead, now I am with a big mush of people from all different worlds, because now it's most appropriate. Now they've combined everyone together, and it's just automatically doing that for me as I play the game. I've gone from being with just my own people to being with lots of people from all over the place in the name of bringing those population levels up. Now, this sounds like it could have a lot of issues with it, a lot of issues, and I can really understand people being a little bit worried. However, they do say something that's quite reassuring to me in this exact same blog post. Currently in the game, if you're in an overflow, regular servers you can't do this for whatever reason, but currently in the game, if you're in an overflow and you want to join people there, you can right-click and select to join on someone. That's now becoming a universal feature for all maps in Guild Wars 2. So, let's say I want to kill Gw2. We know that Gw2 is just about to spawn, and I've just loaded into that map, and I want to do it with my guildies, but ArenaNet system is kind of bad, and instead it's put me with a bunch of Emery Bay people, and I really didn't want to be there. Well, there's no problem. You just right-click someone, say, hey, I want to join on this version, and you go through. So even when it does mess up, which we don't know how often it will, they at least have this safeguard in here. You can still right-click and join, and you have that freedom to go wherever you want. You will notice, though, that nothing I've mentioned resolves some of the biggest issues with the server system right now. They almost didn't need to do this huge overhaul of it if they just fixed a couple of things. Number one, people wanted ways to be able to reserve their own overflows. There is still no way to do that. And people wanted a queuing system that actually worked. The main reason why overflows right now really irritate people, say there's a full overflow with my guild trying to kill the worm and I can't get in, it's because queues don't exist. We're forced to brute force our way in by constantly zoning in and out of portals or running macros that quickly ping join on server and hope that someone DCs so that we can get in, because none of the queues actually work. The queues are completely broken. If queues did work, then we could say, oh yes, I want a slot on this overflow, please put me into the queue. Alright, ticking down, there we go, somebody's left, finally I get to go in, and it's fair. Nothing about the system right now is fair. I could be trying to zone in for an hour straight, and my douchebag friend comes in and gets it on the third try, and I'm not happy for him. I'm really annoyed because I feel like I deserve that place, but it's a dog-eat-dog system, and there's no way he's going to give me his place. That is a big issue with the current system, and that has not been fixed under their new system. There are still player caps to servers, and there will still be brute forcing into those maps when you have a particularly large guild trying to run a certain event somewhere. I'm going to come back to this in a second, this idea of guilds grouping together to do things, because they have done some other quality of life that might be able to resolve that I'll talk about in the second post. Anyway, so the post goes on a bit, and it's got a lot of fluffy language trying to explain to people how wonderful this will be. They actually give some stats for their tests and their simulations about how this actually works in practice, like what percentage of more players you see. And the most interesting stat to me was that the average population of each map in Guild Wars 2 after this change is up by 225%. Every map you go in, you're going to be seeing a lot more people, well over double the amount of people you would have been seeing before, and that's going to be really great. That does excite me. Guild stuff aside, I think this is absolutely phenomenal for the idea of making new characters, leveling up once again, which is something I've been talking about a lot, wanting to do, seeing the other changes that are coming with this feature pack. So that's really cool. And I'm looking forward to doing it even more now than I was before. One caveat to that, though, is when this system first comes out, because obviously it could be a minefield, they have been a little bit smart with it, and they've said, right, we're only going to do it for the main cities, we're only going to do it for the very low-level zones, level 1 to level 15 zones. Everything else is going to continue to function like normal, just in case there are huge game-breaking, crippling issues, and we'll fix them. And then later on in 2014, the entire world will be brought under the new system. And I kind of wish there was a perfect world where I could be 100% sure there were no bugs, and they could just unveil it for the whole world just so that I could have that full experience of leveling up entirely, but that's not going to happen. So I'll have to rely on the hope that many other players are going to want to level up once the feature pack comes out and go from there. Alright, anyway, so that was the first post. This just announced, hey, mega servers are a thing. We appreciate as well, they said at the end, that guilds could be a bit, you know, worried about this, and this is going to mean other changes for dynamic events. We'll talk about those in the next few posts. So, let's go on to post 2. This was the first post of 2 that came out today. This is titled World Bosses and Events. Now, to come into this, I guess I'll explain how something's working in Guild Wars 2 at the moment. And that is that currently in the game, most events and big world bosses like the Fire Shaman and the Fire Elemental and the Alpha Golem, is it, in Mount Maelstrom, or like the Mega Destroyer, all these world bosses all have their own specific timers that are running individually on different worlds, right? Different maps. This goes not even just for the world events, but pretty much all the events that are out there. For example, I might want a Quaggan Tonic, but it's not up on Emery Bay. I have a look and I realise, oh, it's actually live right now on Blackgate. I guess I'll go over to Blackgate. Maybe a more common one for people who don't like Quaggans that much is a particular dungeon, Crucible of Eternity, is not open on Hinge of Denravi at the moment, but it is on Tarnished Coast, so everybody goes and guests over there so that they can get at the dungeon. Now, under the new system, none of this is going to work because maps are being dynamically created and deleted, just like overflows, all over the place, constantly. You know, there could be 10 maps going on in the Field of Ruin at prime time, and then later, when a world boss is up, for example, and then later on, you know, 12 hours down the line when everybody's asleep over in the States, all of a sudden on NA servers, there is very little activity and only one map there. Where they're opening and closing like this, it sort of breaks the way events currently work. So to address this, they are making all of these big world events guaranteed to spawn at the same time on all maps that exist. The Fire Elemental, for example, he could be spawning at varying times on different worlds at the moment. Under the new change, every day at a certain point when the clock in real time strikes, you know, 12:15 or whatever it ends up being, the Fire Elemental will spawn on all maps that exist. It means that basically all that confusion is gone. It's just, this is the time you want to be, this is the place you want to be, and you know that it's going to be there. This is actually a feature they already had in the game. The example they use in the blog post is living world things, but this has been going on with the mega bosses in the game already. Tequatl and the Worm, at the very least I know, have been under this system already. These are 2 bosses currently in the game that will spawn once every hour without fail. Whether you're on an overflow, no matter what the server is, they do it. And I guess they've just taken this idea and applied it to all big events that exist out in the game. Now, the minor events, like the Quaggan one, I guess, that I was talking about before, are not being changed in this way, and they also give kind of a weird reason, but I guess I can understand why they're doing it, for the ore temples, or the big events that go on in ore as well. Also don't have set moments like that. Ore is kind of one of those areas where you begin a big push through, right, and it's not something you're waiting on a certain time to do, and you just push through and take the temple. So they will exist outside of this system, the small events and the ore stuff. They did categorize all of the big events in the game to make it a bit clearer to people, and they all have different amounts of time for hour and they'll pop up. Okay, so for example, they've got some events they call the hardcore mega organized events, right? These are the Karka Queen, which I find kind of interesting because it's not hardcore or mega organized. But you've got the Karka Queen, you've got the evolved Jungle Worm, and you've got Tequatl. These 3 will be under the new system spawning once every 8 hours. So Tequatl will spawn, then the Jungle Worm will spawn, then the Karka Queen will spawn, and then we wait hours, and then Tequatl spawns Evolved Jungle Worm. So you still have an opportunity to kill all 3, but it happens once every 8 hours now. That is actually a much slower spawn rate than we saw before, where they would spawn, as I said earlier, every other hour. But I think maybe this is a smart change because most of those spawn windows were completely wasted, where there weren't enough guilds or communities out there to really tackle Tequatl 12 times per day. It just wasn't happening. Now, some people also might be a little bit worried, like, oh damn, that might put a spawn window out of my opportunity to kill him. Again, I will come back to this in a second when they talk specifically about guilds. Anyway, those are the hardcore mega organized. Then they have a category for what they call standard world events. This is exactly out of their mouth. This set of 6 world events is comprised of the original world event content that has been available since the launch of Guild Wars 2. One of these events will begin on the hour and half an hour in a repeating rotation, and then they also have low-level world events, which they say because players at low levels are more restricted in their choice of content, this classification is made of a small rotation of events that occur in the level 1 to 15 starting zones. One of these 4 events begins every 15 minutes and 45 minutes plus the hour of every hour. What does that all mean? Because honestly that sounds far more complicated than it has to. It means that when the update goes live, every 15 real-world minutes at 2 o'clock, a world boss will spawn somewhere. You can go and try and kill it. At 2:15, a different world boss will spawn. At 2:30, a different world boss. At 2:45, a different. Every single 15 minutes, 24 hours a day, there will be different world bosses going on. And this idea of being on a train to go and fight all of them now is a much more like rigid structure. And yes, this does mean that once every 8 hours, one of those spawn windows in the 15 minutes is going to be a very huge, difficult boss that other world boss raiders out there think, oh yeah, we may as well give it a shot. If you want a lot of specifics, I'm not going to spend the time in this video going through every single spawn window. Look in the description. I'll give you a link to all the blogs I'm talking about, but it's the second one there, and it will have a full schedule of what exactly is going on. I'm actually not sure whether these are changing with the update coming up or later on. Remember that they said that the mega servers were only going to be cities and low-level maps. Does that mean that only the low-level maps are going to have sort of standardized world events, or are they just going to standardize it all for now, and then when the mega servers come in, it's just, you know, completing what was already done? I actually don't know the answer to that question. I'm assuming that it will all be standardized, though, on the 15th, so bear that in mind. There have been, again, to accommodate for this fact, there have been a lot of changes, supposedly. They didn't go into specifics, to the events themselves. They say that all the events can now fail. If you remember last time they did a big update to the world bosses, they added timers for them running out. They basically said every single one of them will now do this, well, they'll either fail in some way or they'll have some kind of timeout. And I guess this will make the fights a bit more engaging, but they do explicitly say, look, this is mainly so that we can keep the schedule tight and we don't want things bugging out or getting weird or being put out of time. They also do add as well that in addition to the failure clauses and timeouts, they're going to be adding new dynamic events around the bosses we currently see. There are going to be new chains going on, new abilities added. Basically, I'm expecting this to be very similar to what we saw, again, with the last world boss update, where they just make things slightly more interesting. You know, they might remove some of the really well-known exploits, like the one in Mount Maelstrom. We'll have to see. Again, they didn't give us any specifics. Earlier I mentioned to you guys that they haven't fixed queues. Queuing is still terrible and it's unfair and you just brute force your way into maps. And they haven't fixed the fact that you can't reserve overflows, so they fill up with, you know, 100 players or whatever, and only a third of them are your guildies and you're really frustrated and annoyed because you can't get people in. These are things that people have to have massive workarounds for at the moment, and is one of the biggest things we've been calling out for fixes. There are no fixes here that they've mentioned, at least. Now, I've also mentioned now that with the second blog post, not only have they done this, but the big mega bosses where the guilds want to congregate and actually participate and do, they've made them even less frequent than they once were. So it's now even more restricting to actually get in there and kill one of them. A lot of people might not be able to do it anymore while they once were, because they have to be sleeping or at work during that time. And there's going to be a lot more other random people because they're all being shoehorned into that time slot to try and fight this thing. This all sounds really shitty. And so they do have a new feature that basically addresses, in a roundabout way, a lot of these issues, right? There's a new type of guild mission coming in the game. We saw guild missions were added a while ago. Really, they've been untouched. There is a new type of guild mission coming called guild world events. These you unlock just as a part of the regular progression after guild challenges. I believe guild challenges were the previous max, unless it was puzzle. I think it went puzzle, then challenges. But now there's a new one, guild mission. And once you've researched it, you've spent your influence on it, you've spent your merits on it, just like you would with the other ones, you can buy guild world event consumables. If you're an officer in a guild that has one of these, you can go into, say you want to do the Triple Trouble Worm event, right? You, as an officer of this guild, can go stand where the event would spawn in the game, trigger this thing, and boom, just like a dev hack, you will instantly spawn the beginning of that event. You can do it completely outside of the 8-hour swing around window time. So, you do actually have a lot more control now. With this in mind, you can choose to have your Tequatl killing runs whenever the hell you want. You can say to people, right, we're doing a guild event at 8:30 EST on Friday. be there or be square. You just go there. It doesn't matter when ArenaNet decided whether Tequatl would spawn. You can all go in there. The general public doesn't know that you're going to be fighting Tequatl, and so you get a map all to yourselves. In theory, everybody can join in. You can get your friends in, and then once you've done it, you can pop Tequatl the second everybody's ready. There's no waiting around, and this also could it potentially mean that for when they add new world bosses, you can chain them. You can do them back to back and keep trying, and there'll be a bit more of that race experience you see in other MMOs where people were trying to get world first. Trying to get world first for the worm was very frustrating in a lot of ways, because we spent so long just waiting for it to spawn to see if our new plan would work or not. Just waiting and waiting and waiting. It was really frustrating, as opposed to raids in other games where you could just, oh, we failed, it's fine, we'll just go and we'll try it again. Oh, we failed, we'll try it again. Yeah, there was none of that in Guild Wars 2. It was just arbitrary sitting about. Now you can bypass that by using this new consumable, and that'll be quite interesting to see as we go forward. So yeah, there is still queuing issues. There are still limits to maps, but we have a lot more control over when these events proc now, and that means you can get all the people you care about into the map before it starts filling up with random pugs, in theory. I don't think it's the most elegant solution, but it is a more elegant solution than we currently see in the game, and I am an advocate for them trying it out, especially since they're doing like a trial run thing for the first 1 to 15 maps to iron out any bugs. I do think the state of Guild Wars 2's like servers and overflows will be better after the patch than it is now. The cherry on the cake, all they have to do is fix queuing. Please, just make queuing a fair system. You've clearly got it to work somehow for World versus World. Just make it work for these mega servers, these, you know, new types of overflows, I suppose. If a mega server is full, if my guild's mega server is full, and I want to get in there for that Tequatl run, please, let me queue for it fairly. Let me wait around. Let me be sure that when I get to the first place in the queue, and I click join, I don't get a random error. I actually get to load in. Please, don't let people skip ahead of me because they're zoning in all the time and they got more lucky than I did. Just add fair queuing, and I think I will be pretty much content with how they have service set up and for open world content. Who knows, my opinion may change on this obviously as things go forward, but for now I think it's at least far better than it was right now. Now, here's for a bit of lameness, though, that they announced at the end of this blog post. Because, again, of the way mega servers work, currently in-game, if you press M, if I'm on Emery Bay, I'm not guessing anywhere, I'm not doing any of that stuff, I'm not in an overflow. I press M and I look at ore, I can see which waypoints are contested. If I look at the Cathedral of Flame, I can see up there, oh, the gate is open. I can go, I can just do that dungeon right now because the waypoint isn't contested. However, with mega servers, again, because stuff's opening and closing all over the place, they can't do this anymore. So now, whenever you open your map, you're just going to see contested waypoints everywhere. Every waypoint that can potentially be contested will be contested for you until you load into the map. So let's say I want to go to the Cathedral of Flame. Now I have to load into the map first. I have to load into Fireheart Rise. And then I have to see, oh, is it open or closed? If it's closed, I get annoyed because I've just wasted waypoint costs. If it's open, then now I also have to waypoint up to the gate too, just to get in and open it for everyone else on my party. It's a little bit of an annoyance, and it's going to be irritating, especially for places like Ore, where some of those, uncontesting a waypoint is really important and a big thing. And that, you lose a lot of quality of life from this. Even worse as well for Ore is many of the features of Ore. One of the things that actually makes Ore kind of interesting is if you take a temple, say you take Balthazar for example, that currently disables all the other Balthazar shrines in the other maps, in the Cursed Shore and Malkor's Leap. These are other maps that have been influenced by your actions in the Straits of Devastation, and that's cool. I really wish there was more, cross-map stuff like that in this game. It would be really interesting. However, they've just openly said, look, with mega servers, this stuff can't work either. So that's all being removed. All of that is being taken out. Now, if you were to take Balthazar, then it's going to disable the Balthazar shrines on your map alone, and I guess the other ones will still all be active. That sucks. That makes the temples even worse than they currently are. My only hope here is the reason why they've done this and allowed it to be so shoddy and rubbish is that in the future they're hoping to do a big revamp to Ore, and I'm not necessarily saying cleanse it and remove the temples altogether, but bring it more into the vision of what they originally had. There was an interview a while ago now where Colin Johansson was talking about how Ore isn't exactly where they once wanted it to be. It doesn't have the exact feel it could have, and that interaction has just been lost even further now. So I hope this is, in a weird, sly way, a way for us to be reassured that they're actually making more changes to Ore down the road. Though they do not say that in the blog post, that's completely my speculation. Anyway, there you go, that's post 2, a bit of a wild ride there, I guess. Some good stuff, some bad stuff. I'm sure there are going to be a lot of people who aren't fully content with the changes, but it's better than it was before, and it's a free update to a game, so I'm not going to complain too much. Article 3, right? This one, I was reading through all this information. I was like, oh my god, we have another blog post? Jesus. Don't worry, it's a short one. This last one is looking at the future. They really have very little to announce here. These are the notes that I took from it. Number one, they just restate that the mega servers are just coming out for lobby maps and the cities first. They say that that's going to be expanded later in 2014. But they also say that many of the changes they want for the future are going to be like December 2014 stuff. So we're talking like right through this year. They say they've got a lot of changes they want to make to guilds. For example, guilds right now have different chapters. This was a term that I didn't realize existed. But currently, if you have a guild that spans players across multiple home worlds, they technically have their own chapters of that guild. They earn influence, they have their own progression tracks. It's all like separate and kind of annoying, really. They're saying that with mega servers, again, this is also kind of weird. That's not changing for now, but sometime down the line, they do want to change it, merge everything together in a nice way. And they also, in this final blog post, talk a little bit about World vs. World. I'll give you a direct quote. They say, though we are moving to our new mega server model in PvE, it's extremely important to us that we maintain the level of identity and competition in World vs. World that we've established since the release of Guild Wars 2. The entire game mode is based on battles between different players aligned to the named worlds, and as such, we have no plans to remove this concept from World vs. World. We'll go into the very specific details about these changes as we approach the launch of this system game-wide, but we wanted to get a head start on messaging this since these are natural questions the addition of our mega server system raises. Really very wishy-washy final article, and that's why I said at the beginning of this video, wow, what an anticlimax that would have been. But there you go. For me, the biggest thing about this change, the biggest positive change, is how it's going to feel for people leveling up in the game now. It really will be awesome to get that launch feeling again where there are many players around. One thing that does suck while you're doing world completion, for example, not even just leveling up, but world completion, and you see some of the cool events that are out there. You're out in Caledon Forest, for example, and you see the event where the Hylic transforms you into loads of different things. How cool was it at launch, seriously, where there were a bunch of players around and you could just begin that meta and know that you were going to meet people and they were all going to zerg around and stuff was going to happen. And yeah, maybe it's a little bit more zergy stuff, but it opens up the game a lot more. There's a lot of group events that you just can't do on most classes. Like, maybe you can get by soloing many group events and champions when you're on your fully geared level 80 and downscaled zone, but while you're leveling up, a lot of this stuff you just have to skip over, and if the population isn't there, it is a shame, you know, it's sad, it's disheartening, especially remembering how it was at launch. And I really do think this is going to bring that feeling back in a big way. Other stuff, like being able to kick off a world boss at any time you want, I think is a good change. It's going to depend a little bit on the price to purchase something like that for your guild, but I am kind of excited by the idea of like guilds stockpiling as many of these consumables as they can in preparation for when the next mega boss comes out. So when it's a race for world first, it's not just a race for like how smart you are or how lucky you were managing to get through it, but refining your strats and stuff is totally based on how active your guild's been before there. You know, who's stockpiled, who had the resources to tackle it. Like, it adds that extra layer, which I kind of enjoy. I think it's disappointing that there's not more changes to the queuing system, and the idea of an overflow leaves people with a very sour taste right now, and the new mega servers are basically just overflows everywhere in a weird way, you know, just smartly done. So I think that's going to put people off initially, but assuming no bugs, it's better. You know, right now we can't right click to join on just a server. We have to go to character select, and then we have to guest, and you only get a couple of guest passes a day. It's just irritating and it's nonsense, and now there is none of that. It's just I want to play with my friends, right click, join them, I'm on that specific mega server, and away I go. And that's the worst case example. That is the worst case example. If the game is genuinely intelligent about where it places you, you shouldn't even have to right click. You should just automatically be with your friends. It knows where you want to be. In terms of actual content for the game, you know, these changes to world bosses are probably one of the big things, but they aren't specific enough about it. If it is anything like before when they refined a lot of the world bosses, I think it'll be excited. Doing world events for like Dragonite ore isn't something I've done for a long time. It's a great source of Dragonite ore, it's a great source of rares mainly, but I haven't done it, and this could bring me back to that, and it could bring a lot of people from what are currently low pop servers back to that as well. You know, there's no more feeling of that, oh man, I can't do this because my server sucks and we never run Balthazar. Hey! Who gives a crap? You're just going to be in the right mega server when it's going on. Everything regimentally timed out like that as well should be kind of fun. I mean, Balthazar exists out of that because Balthazar isn't going to be regimentally timed, but still, I hope you get what I'm saying. Anyway, that's just generally my opinions. Overall, positive. I saw quite a bit of negativity just from the first post. I think people were judging it a little bit too early, but as ever, it's something you have to experience once it goes in, and we see how badly they botch it, if they botch it at all. Anyway, let me know what you think, guys. Big change. that's the end of the feature pack stuff. It's going to be huge when this stuff comes out. And I'll keep you posted about leveling that character. Maybe we can do some community events, maybe. Or even, I kind of want to do some obscure farms as well. Anyway, I'll keep you posted. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Would love to see what you have to say. And I will see you next time.